It's funny because we talk about hacking the vote and what have you. There truly was issues going on out there. Voters were allowed to put a card in the machine to start the card up. Oh, well, this is exciting. This is electronic times. We didn't understand the implications of that, and the fact that somebody could bring their own card and stick it in the machine and hack the machine. That's how that kind of stuff worked. But we've learned a lot, and that's one of the reasons New York State took so long to decide which voting machines to choose, because we weren't going to be party to that. It got to the point where the Justice Department, the federal Justice Department, forced New York to finally buy a machine. But I tell you what, I felt a lot more comfortable buying the machines when we did than watching what happened. Now, a lot of that is still, that doesn't go away. That concern and those kind of things don't go away easily in terms of what people think. But I'm going to tell you, the machines are a lot better today. There's a lot more security out there. Random sampling is real random, not like, well, I pick which ones I want to do. That's the random sampling. Those are the kind of things that happened in the early days of this. But the laws have changed. I often tell people, believe me, the laws are a lot stricter now relative to elections. And if you don't believe me, there's the law book, the federal law book from 2000. See that law book? These were all the federal laws relative to elections. Okay? There's the 2017 law book, exactly the same book. Okay? So things a lot different. A lot different today. We have a lot more rules and regulations, a lot more security is in place, a lot more reporting. You have no idea the kind of reporting we have to do on overseas voters, military and overseas voters. Every ballot, we have to make sure the numbers, we don't report who, but we have to report every single number, and we report 2 or 3 times before the elections, 2 or 3 times after the elections in terms of the counting process. It is really an extensive process now, and frankly, that has changed the machines, it's changed the ballots, it's changed the way we do elections. It really to a great, great, great degree. Does that answer your question? Does it help?
It helps.
Yes.
The League of Women Voters is opening absentee ballots on November 10th.
Yes.
And I'm wondering why they can't be opened earlier and fed into the
We,
computer.
unfortunately, we're going to have about, we figure somewhere, this is going to be a record year for absentee ballots, okay? And the timing on election day is just going to be impossible. We're going to probably have them opening somewhere between 13 and 17,000 absentee ballots. It's going to take all day long for us to run them through the system. The process we're going to use is, they're actually going to start opening at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're actually going to start counting as soon as we have the first batch.
On November 10th?
On November 10th. Because it's going to take us all day to count them. We could never count them on election night, not that many.
Could the process start earlier so that they're, on November 8th, they're fed in if they're opened on the...
Well, you can't open them before election day. We could never open them before election day. It's against the law.
But in other states, we hear that more Democrat than Republican, or more women are voting. How do they know that? They're opening their ballots?
No. I can tell you how many absentee ballots we got back, and I can tell you actually the demographics on where they came back from. But I can't tell you how they voted. I can tell you right now we have probably, I'm trying to remember the numbers from that I looked at this morning. There's about, oh gosh, I'm thinking there's 7,000 ballots back, probably. I think we're only about 500 apart, David, Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
I think the Republicans have about 500 less ballots back than the Democrats at the moment. But that's how we can tell, that kind of stuff. But there's just so many, it's going to take us all day to count them, even with the machines we have. The central count scanners, it's going to take all day. We're hoping to be done by, we're hoping the opening will be done in kind of a regular normal time, because we got a lot of the league in, and we actually are supplementing with some of our people. But the counting will take probably till 6 or 7 o'clock at night. From the time they get that first batch after the first batch has been put together in the morning, right after 9 o'clock. It's going to take them probably, we're figuring probably close to 8, 9, 10 hours to count them. So, yes.
I have two questions that people have asked me as I've been working around town. So one is in, I guess it was 138th district, that very close Republican primary, with 3 votes separating them. A person might have thought a complete recount was in order.
There's 2 or 3 things I'll tell you about that race. And to be honest with you, I certainly would love to have a discussion about what triggers or doesn't trigger, that kind of thing. But in that race, it's interesting, although Vasquez was ahead on the machine count, but if you added in the absentees, the first round of absentees, he almost lost almost his whole lead. It came down to just a few votes ahead. So the absentee ballots, definitely we saw a trend go this way. A big trend, I mean a really big trend. And the second set of absentees, it followed the same percentage of trend. And what it told me is that Zink, who was the other guy, he had done a real good job of getting out and getting absentee voters to vote. And ironically, since he had done that, I have to be honest with you, if there's any problems with any ballots at all, it is highly likely, I'm saying probably 99% chance, that Zink's lead would have actually increased if in fact they had been hand counted, if there was problems. And we've generally not found issues with the ballots, but if you were to, I mean, it would go that way. I mean, there's just no question about it. In a lot of ways, this though is a case of how much can we do between elections. And I talked earlier about consolidating primaries. Well, with this primary so late, with this September primary, we actually had to, our certification date for this primary was 3 days after we were supposed to mail the military ballots. That's why all the military people got a federal ballot with the federal offices on it and a state and local ballot. They got 2 ballots they had to vote on. So you didn't know, this multiple primary got even crazier with this election. Now, until we can, and I feel strongly about this, until we can create an environment where we're given the time, I have to live with that. Now, the machines have done a really good job of counting ballots, and we've looked at a lot of ballots. Voters have gotten really good. They understand how to fill them in better than they ever had before. One of the lessons we learned was not to tell them how not to do the ballot, because when we put fill it in like this, don't do this, they did this and this and this. So we stopped putting that on quite a while ago, and now they've gotten really good at filling out the ballots. The statistics on this, and there is statistics. So I talked to the New York City Board, because they have a different process. I talked to one of the state commissioners, Doug Kellner, and the statistics on this, he said, is less than 0.5% that there was something that would have changed this election. So my position is that let's get this other stuff, we gotta get this other stuff fixed. Then we can talk about, should there be a threshold? Frankly, I'd like new equipment that fills out the ballot. Then there wouldn't be any issues. So I mean, there's also a whole bunch of other things that need to happen. But in this given case, trying to do that would have become really problematic. And you know what? I have to be honest with you. We certainly would have had conversation if there was some thinking that the trend or the direction or the process could have really done some of that. I don't know, we might not have been just taking a stand that, look, we need to get on with the election. It's hard to tell. But it's a situation where we did. We literally were waiting on the judge's answer to that, and that day we started printing ballots.
Got it. So one other question.
Yeah.
So some people who think that it's sensible to require IDs to vote, when they realize that there's no ID anywhere in the registration process and all you have to do is match the signature when you show up. Like, can you walk me through why our registration system is fine without any ID?
Well, you do have ID. you have to provide your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And we actually do a check on that. You have no idea how many of those bounce from DMV, okay? And so we get those back and we deal with those in terms of whatever situation comes back on match a name, match a birth date, that kind of stuff. Also, too, when we take in a new voter registration, we send out this really nice letter that says, welcome, you're a new voter, what have you. But we send that letter out with a return address requested on it. In other words, we don't deliver it unless they live there. So now we're doing a second check to make sure you live where you actually said you lived. And you know what? That's not enough, because then every year in August, we mail to, oh, by the way, it's going to be 460,000, an all-time high. All 460,000 voters next August will mail to them a nice letter that says, okay, this is a new year, these are the elections that are up for office, this is where your polling place is. And it's really a nice, friendly, the purpose of the letter is to make sure you live where you do. We get anywhere between 20 and 30,000 of those letters back every year. Now, about 17 or 18,000 of them in this year, voters had moved within Monroe County. And guess what? We could move them. So they're going to be in their new poll book and they didn't even have to do anything. So we have a process that is really pretty extensive at verifying that kind of stuff. Also, too, all of the poll books are audited when the election is over with. In other words, we go through every poll book, we compare signatures again, we try to look to see if there's some issues. Signatures change over time, as we've discovered. I don't know if any of you have ever gotten a little letter from us that says, you know, your signature isn't quite the same as it used to be. Can you give us a new one? And we do that. We do that on a regular basis. So there is a lot of things we do to protect that and to make sure that the integrity of that data is good. And it seems to really work well. The concept is that, and I know everybody's saying, well, everybody can get an ID. But I'll tell you what, not everybody can do it. Okay, good, thank you. I don't think it's as easy as people think it is.
No, it's not easy at
Yeah,
all.
so, anyway, yes, over there?
I have two questions. About the signature, I just was reading something, of course, I have to preface this by saying, I don't believe everything I read on the internet,
Okay.
But there was something that somebody was challenged when they went to vote because the signature was changed. Now, I know that my signature is changing.
Yep.
I do know that.
Mhm.
Now, the day that I go to vote, if they say, gee, signature has changed, then how do I prove who I am? By my driver's license?
If you've got some ID with you, you can do it that way. Or what the most logical process is that if it is, they'll make you take an oath.
Okay.
They'll make you swear to the fact that your signature, that is you and that's your signature. They actually make a note of it. And then you'll get a letter from us following up that'll come to you, because we want it to be separate now. We want to double check. We'll send a letter saying, gee, your signature seems to have recently changed. Can you provide us a new one? And then we'll compare all three. I mean, interestingly enough, on absentee ballot, we check the signature on the record. We check the signature on the absentee ballot application. And when absentee ballots come back, they come back in an envelope with the voter signature on the outside. So we're actually checking their signature 3 times. So there's a lot of verification done. And yes, we rely on signatures knowing that they do change. But it's amazing, and it's funny because I come from a banking background. I was with Lincoln Rochester Trust Company, if anybody okay. That gives you a perspective of what I started. But I was with the bank for 25 years. And I spent a lot of my years, early years, on a teller line, cashing checks. And boy, did I ever learn a lot about signatures. It is amazing. There is probably elements of your signatures that doesn't change. And if you take a close look at certain lines and certain tilts and what have you, not a signature expert, don't suggest I am, but you can see pretty quickly. And in essence, our people have learned a lot. They're amazing at what they can come up with. Oh, look at this. See, this twists up and just curls around like this. They can find stuff like that. And in essence, pretty quickly say, you know, I'm feeling comfortable. Let's ask them for a new signature, but this is probably right.
Okay, my second question is, when someone passes, how do you know that they have to take a look at the voter rolls?
We get through the state board from the New York State Health Department. It goes through the county health department, the state health department, it comes back down to us. And we get a list that we have to process online from them to take off the rolls.
Okay, so what we're hearing right now is there are 2,000 people on a death row that haven't been removed from the whether it's, throughout the United States or not. Is that something we should be leaving, or?
I have to be honest with you. I can tell you, for the most part, particularly since we do signatures, audits, what have you, that I've never seen a dead person vote. I can tell you I have seen a person we thought was dead vote, okay, because the health department got the wrong name, and we took somebody off the rolls, and they showed up at the polling place and voted by affidavit ballot. And we went, oh. And and that signature looks identical. It's so obvious, And so we sent him a nice little letter, really glad to have you back. But I mean, I've had that happen. Probably it'll happen in this election 1 or 2 times. We'll have knocked somebody off the rolls inadvertently, yes.
Is there any discussion about moving the election to the weekend?
That's part of the early voting discussion. That's part of, holiday. That's part of all of that discussion. I certainly think that we need to do something. Let's face it, our community isn't Kodak, Xerox, go to work on one shift, go to work on another shift, go to vote. I mean, it's almost like lockstep. We could do that, 25, 30 years ago. But the environment's changed, and people have a whole bunch of different schedules that we really need to understand and address. And when we talk about changing the voting process, that has to be part of the discussion. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I've had extensive discussions with some of our elected officials about that already, and I do believe that it's one of those parts of the early voting concept. Yes?
A few brief questions, and I'd be happy to have brief answers. What are the considerations surrounding posting the actual results of each polling place before the workers leave?
Posting the results at the polling place?
Put them on the door. Put them on
Well, it's not something we leave there because we take everything with us before we go home. But what we've asked the
I'm
inspectors...
suggesting a change in that rule. I don't know
Yeah.
what that rule serves, but what are the considerations?
At this given point, given the equipment we have, I'll be frank with you, that would be really hard.
Well, I'm not asking for equipment.
No, you don't understand.
So,
Trying to post a...
maybe the script initials of the poll worker, that this is it, so that people can know what they just did and be sort of reassured that it's in there, and what their neighbors did, and you have a very local result.
I appreciate that. I know you're not going to like my answer, but I have to be honest with you. Again, asking the poll workers to fill out a sheet of paper would really lend to the potential for them making an error, because when we were using recanvassing sheets, we had errors all over the place.
Confess and correct. Okay.
Well, but what I'm saying is it's not necessarily going to provide accurate results. I could say to you, okay, well, we'll look at that, but I'm not. I'm going to tell you what I really believe. I believe it doesn't serve the purpose that you want it to serve, and I understand what you're suggesting.
Okay, you've used the word belief several times.
Yeah.
This is not a religion. It's not an article.
I'm not suggesting it is.
I wholly differ with you. You have not
Okay.
supported your position, in my opinion.
Okay.
Now, second question. Is there a limit to the number of poll watchers at a location?
Yes.
Okay.
3 from each party.
I'm concerned about the national Trump website where he's encouraging people to come
Yeah.
on and be, he didn't say party poll watchers, but Trump poll watchers. And I hope
They
that-
can't be.
I hope that you have an election worker go in there to find out what sort of instructions he gives these people.
Well, understand, they have to have a certificate to be a poll watcher. You can't, the inspectors are going to ask you for a certificate before you can be a poll watcher. So if you don't have a certificate, you're going to be asked to leave the polling place. If you give somebody trouble, we will call the law enforcement agencies.
And if too many poll watchers show up,
They will be asked to leave.
so the first come, first served.
Yes.
Okay? And then, how did you get your position as commissioner?
The parties actually make a recommendation to the county legislature. The county legislature reviews that and then either confirms or turns down the
Thank you
recommendation.
very much for being sharing this.
Sure. Yes.
I have 2 questions. About the poll watchers, are they identified in any way?
They have to provide a certificate.
Well, that's sort of like hidden, I mean, if you're...
No. They have to hand a certificate to the inspectors.
But then
Oh.
they're there.
Then they're there, yes.
Are they like outside the polling place, or like watching people?
They cannot disrupt the activities in the polling place. They can't come up to you as a voter. They believe it or not, they're very limited to what they can do. They can ask about who voted. In other words, they can look, they can't touch the books, but they can look at them. They can turn around and they can challenge a voter, as I described earlier.
So they could stand up,
and they can-
stand up next to like where the polling books are?
Yeah.
They can stand by the table. And that's very limited. For example, if a party has 3 poll workers and poll watchers in the thing, only one of them can stand by the table. So the rules are very, very explicit about that. They're not allowed to interface with the voter at all. They're not allowed to if they'll be asked to leave if they try to interfere with your voting process whatsoever. I mean, understand, again, the poll watchers, they can be there for the end of the night. They can get the vote counts. A lot of them are there for that. They get the counts from that polling site and take them with them. Very often they'll do that. They can be there for the opening to see how the polling site is set up. But they're very limited in what they can do.
And the other question was, on election day, we often hear, on the media about places maybe around the country where there are lines that it's taking 2, 3, 4
Yes.
hours to vote. You don't really hear that so much around here. Do you have any information about what areas it takes the longest to vote in
Well,
our district, in our...
It's all the formulas that they use to determine the number of privacy stations and the number of machines that are going to be used and in how many locations. One of the big things that we heard was the long lines. I believe it was in Arizona or out west, one of the western states. And I realized when I looked at the detail on that, they'd only opened up 30% of their polling places that they normally would on any general election day. And this recent primary where the turnout was what? Dismal as can be, we had all but one polling place open. We had consolidated one small polling place. But otherwise than that, every single polling place that we opened up on general election day was opened up in their primary. And that's why you don't see lines.
Yeah, so in this area here, like the busiest place, do you have any information, like how long someone might have to wait?
What we're going to do is, you're going to probably hear us in the next week begin to talk to people and say, okay, this is a presidential year. A lot more people are going to come out. We're going to ask you to be a little bit patient. But not patient a lot. Patient to maybe at a real busy time, like dinner time or something, it could be 20 minutes. Okay? It could be 25 minutes. Let me tell you, if it's a half an hour, I have 2 more people heading out to that polling site to help process the voters because we're concerned about the delay in time.
That's true.
Okay? And so that's kind of how we gauge it. But you'll hear us saying that probably over the next, the press, you know how the press has this story, then this story. Well, these will be the stories you'll begin to hear. Yes? And then you.
I'm wondering, I know there are lots of voter registration forms carried into the Board of Elections that last week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, I'm sure they're all going to be processed, but will there be time for cards to be mailed out so they all know where to vote?
I think all that stuff has been mailed out.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, I mean, we finished processing. We got, I think somewhere around 2,500 forms the last day. We got 3,000 more through DMV on Saturday and 3,100 more through DMV on Monday. They were all timely. But we got everything processed and in the system. I believe we mailed last Friday when we started printing our poll books. So everything I think went in the mail on Friday. It might have not gone out until Monday. This is Wednesday, Monday. But I think everything was in the mail. Yeah.
That's great.
And we have, to give you some perspective, we have about 43,000 new voters in Monroe County this year. New, absolutely new for the first time voting. And it's interesting because I thought, the primary was the real thing that did it. But there was only about, I think about 13,000 of them were just from the end of last year's registration until primary closed. Registration closed at about 13,000. About 30,000 of them have been since the primary. Okay? We process this probably somewhere around, including address changes and what have you, close to 75,000 forms this year. I'm sorry, you're next and then you. Okay.
I have 2 questions. One, you said that the poll watchers could sometimes hang around until the end so they could see the count.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought you had said earlier, the blue card comes out,
Mhm.
that goes either downtown or to the town.
The red card comes out of the machine. Well, first of
Well,
all,
one card.
they close the machine, they shut the machine down, they run it two tapes out of the machine, and to give you a perspective, we're really concerned. We have about 30-some machines where we're going to have technicians out in the middle of the day changing the tapes, because after running the 0 tapes in the morning, if we left the roll of tape in there, because you can't fit any bigger than you can, it's the biggest we can fit in there. If we left the tape in there that was in there in the morning, we would run out of tape when we tried to do the totals at night, just by printing 2 copies of the tape. That's how long the tapes are. So they'll run 2 tapes. 1 tape will go in the red bag that David spoke of, along with the red card, along with a few other pieces of paper. There's a control sheet that goes in there, there's a seal that goes on the bag and what have you, and that goes out of the polling place, we hope within 10 minutes. Oh my God, we're over time, right, aren't we? Oh my goodness. Within a few minutes of the polling place closing, hopefully that red bag is gone with that in it. The other tape is supposedly posted on the wall while the inspectors finish picking up. They're supposed to do that. They post the other tape on the wall,
So that has
or put it on a table. Sometimes they put it on a table, but they make the other tape available while they finish cleaning up, and they put the blue card in the blue ballot bag with the ballots, and that goes in another direction. So it's kind of like we got things going in different directions. But that tape should be on the wall from the time they finish closing the machine until they finish taking everything else down.
And the tape has the numbers.
The tape has the numbers and candidate names and all that kind of stuff on it. But it's really long.
My other question is just about the documentation. You said that you can check it for a new voter, whether their social security number is good or their driver's license is good, but you don't have to be a citizen to have either a social security number.
Well, when it goes to driver's license knows if you're a citizen or not.
Okay.
And matter of fact, we've had conversation with DMV about that just to make sure that we were getting the right information. And they do kick back if they're not a citizen.
Okay. And when in terms of getting the dead people, the dead list, if you, I don't know how this works, but if you die out of state, does the New York Board of Health know anything about you?
Not always, but we
So
do.
that would be
But we
those
do.
dead people.
We do look sometimes through. Particularly in a year like this, we do look through the obituaries ourselves. I don't know if I want to admit that too loudly, but we try to kind of.
But that would explain
we try to get a
however many
perspective,
people
but yeah,
nationwide, dead people
We-
who are still on the voting list.
We do ask
Nobody knows.
people, and we actually say this on the back of our envelope that goes out to, is that if you're getting an envelope for somebody that's in your household and they're deceased, if they moved or are deceased, we actually say that. I can't believe we do, but we do. We say, please send it back. So we're trying very hard to kind of clean those up. But I don't notice that people have. We really need to kind of let people clean up here. I'm going to pack up a little bit. It'll take us a few minutes before we leave. And if you've got some individual questions you want to grab David or I for, at least I know I'll be here for a few more minutes while I'm packing up. But we got to let people pick up because they do need to close down the building, right? Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for attending this evening for this really important discussion. Thank you so much to Tom and David. We are most grateful for your knowledge and your accessibility. We also thank our hosts, the First Unitarian Church and John Keever. Is it Carol Ann Cleary? Carol Ann Cleary. And our program chair, Mary Myers, who did such a phenomenal job. We're so grateful to all the members of our league who made this and all our forums possible. I do want to remind you that we have a forum coming up in November. It'll be on the 14th. And we're starting a new element in our forums. We're looking at executive agencies within the state. We don't tend to focus on them, but we're going to be looking at the Attorney General's office, and they have a regional office here in Rochester. Turns out Ted O'Brien is the Assistant Attorney General in charge. We're going to be asking them to come in and talk to us about the resources and the services that they provide for us in the Monroe County area. So we hope to see you at Asbury First United Methodist Church on November 14th. And drive carefully. Please remember to vote on November 8th. Thank you.